back, everyone, to a very special episode of Pleb Underground. Joining me today is fellow Bitcoiner, Pleb, and longtime friend to me in this space, Run the Banks. He's agreed to sit down and have a chat with me about essentially everything that's going on right now in the Bitcoin space, and I'm super curious to get his take. So, without further ado, let's dive into this chat. But before we do, a word from our sponsors.
It's like people only do things because they get paid. And that's just really sad.
Pleb Underground is brought to you by KnowHue. Go check them out at knowhue.com. They are building Amazon for Bitcoiners, a one-stop shop for Bitcoin-only brands. New brands are going to be added every month, so go check them out. Don't miss what's happening at knowhue.com. Pleb Underground is brought to you by CypherSafe. You guys all know I am a pet rock enjoyer. Love the swag, love the collectibles. This is the ultimate Bitcoin collectible. That's right, guys. We're talking 16 ounces of solid titanium, the Bitcoin Rolo Triangle. Go check it out at CypherSafe.io. Pleb Underground is brought to you by Thunderfunder. Go check them out at thunderfunder.com. Thunderfunder is a funding portal registered with the SEC and a member of FINRA. Their mission is to provide retail investors access to investments while supporting the growth of open source projects. They love Bitcoin. Check out their shitcoins. Thunderfunder.com.
Hello.
Run the Banks. You sound good. This is working. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on.
I am so happy that you fixed up the audio on your end and that we can finally have this chat. I think it's, in all honesty, of course, I think it's long overdue because we've known each other for a really long time. And for the people, I guess, for the people who don't know who you are, I'm gonna give my description. I'm gonna say that you're like a low key pleb that offers Bitcoin pleb that offers a I'd say objective, real signal, even though you may not feel that way, right? That you do, you're just kind of, spouting your mind on Twitter. But to me anyways, you're obviously one of the more real people in this space. And, I thank you for it. So, yeah, I don't know. That was just like a big intro of me telling you how much I love your stuff. So there you go.
Oh, thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. That's the way, man. You got to keep it real, no matter what. No matter what, we've seen, we've known each other for a pretty long time now.
It's like what, 6 years?
6, 7,
years?
yeah, 6, 7 years practically. And we definitely seen some shit, huh?
We've definitely seen some shit. And it's interesting that you bring that up. And I'm obviously very curious because I genuinely feel like, so obviously there's Bitcoiners out there in the, in the real world, right? Bitcoin supporters, Bitcoin stackers, they don't actually actively spend their time, on social media. And then there's those of us who, we might classify as the Bitcoin extremists, right? The Bitcoin maximalists that, spending time on social media discussing Bitcoin or even just thinking about Bitcoin and putting out our thoughts. This is kind of one of the big things we do. And essentially, I'm very curious. What is your feeling? First of all, is there a difference between the Bitcoin supporters, right, or the crowd of people that came into Bitcoin back in 2017, let's say, or 2016, or even 2015, versus today? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first, I want to say that I'm more of a purist than anything else.
Can you define that for yourself? just so that people can give us shit after and be like, that's not my definition.
I mean, everybody's got their own definition. My definition of myself is a purist, where I come from, my experience, just maintaining a level of fundamentals without being distracted or coerced into some other file or folder that society creates. I consider myself more of a purist. I mean, maximalist kind of came up maybe around 17 or 18. Maybe a lot of it was came from like the fork wars and the Bcash crowd or the shitcoiners. kind of created as like a slur, but then it kind of backfired and kind of spawned a life of its own. Which, a lot of stuff does, create a spawn a life of its own. But regardless, I'm a purist, and it's all about unrelenting fundamentals and purity of the core values of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think that's a really solid definition. And just to add to what you were saying, right? It's Vitalik. So you're right. It's the shitcoiners, right? Vitalik attempted to shame us, right? As maximalists, right? It's just we don't get it, right? We just
Yeah.
don't understand all this other innovation. We're just stupid Bitcoin maximalists that just don't see the future, I guess.
Yeah. Blockchain's the future.
Right? Right? Like blockchain's and it's funny that you say that, because obviously we're seeing what's going on right now, right? With and I'm not criticizing, not getting into politics. I don't give a shit. Red and blue is all the same color to me, right? But my point is that we're seeing what Elon is doing with Doge right now, and I saw some mention about auditing the IRS and auditing the Treasury, which, hey, I'm not going to complain about that shit. Absolutely audit that stuff. But then I saw the word blockchain.
Yeah, of course. It's a natural progression into realizing the core values of Bitcoin. I mean, blockchain is almost it's essential, but it's not an important. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's an important.
It's only important for Bitcoin.
It's only important for it works on Bitcoin, but you try to establish a blockchain for anything else. I mean, you might as well just use, a really strong, what do you call
Database.
it? Yeah, just a strong database. You don't even need a token. If your product if your product is going to solve real world problems, you don't need a token. You don't need a blockchain. Just release it into the world and let the market decide.
That's absolutely right. I mean, you could see it. I mean, if it was so valuable, right? How come Microsoft SQL doesn't have a token, right? How come Oracle doesn't have a token, right? It's just fucking nonsense, right? It's technology that most likely is going to fail, but they need to monetize their activity, right? So you need exit liquidity. So boom, born the token. So yeah, that's it's such fucking nonsense. Sorry for my swearing. I'm trying not to swear. But going back to this, I'm also curious though. Okay, so obviously, you and I kind of came into this space around the same time, and we saw, I would say, the evolution of the Bitcoin pleb from standing up to the influencers that were trying to push specific narratives to all of a sudden, it almost seems like there aren't any plebs anymore. I know there's a few of us, here and there, but for the most part, I feel as though we've traded in our pirate flag for a fucking MicroStrategy flag, or sorry, a Strategy B flag. I don't know if you saw that, but he rebranded. Apparently, it's not a MicroStrategy anymore. It's just a strategy, and there's Bitcoin. So
yeah, I mean,
have we changed? Have we lost the plot?
One could say. I think, in my opinion, I think it looks like, a lot of people have forgot all about what low time preference means. We swapped it out for NGU, maybe. Like our favorite villain, Christine Lagarde, says, it will come. It will come.
That's a good point. Even though she sucks, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, you remember, gradually, then suddenly, it's like,
well,
I know
that doesn't get said anymore.
And I know having patience is tough, but that's, part of the Bitcoin journey is, strengthening your patience, sharpening your fundamentals. It's all part of it. The whole master thing. I mean, I don't know. It's part of me thinks it's a lot of social engineering.
When you say master, you're talking about MSTR, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I just thought just to be clear for the audience. Okay. Yeah.
I mean,
so, go on.
It's like it's almost like a social attack. co-opting principles, and again, it's just not, it's just my principle. I mean, it's just my, it's just a theoretical evaluation. There's a lot of strong plebs out there. There's a lot of strong Bitcoiners out there that, something new comes up. And if it's got, if it's supporting Bitcoin for whatever reason, people are going to jump on it. If it's going to get, if you're going to gain financially from it, you're going to jump on it. But, the level of simping is just, I don't know. It's a little bit overwhelming,
I feel, yeah, I can't disagree with you. And again, right, it's this delicate thing where, we understand that hyper Bitcoinization is going to have, right, there's going to be players that are going to come to the space that we don't necessarily personally approve of or agree with or think that they're here with the best intentions, like whatever our opinions are, right? It's almost irrelevant. But
I mean, my
yeah.
question is,
Yes.
if he didn't get the support from the cyber hornets in the beginning, would these people still be supporting MicroStrategy?
Oh, it's so funny that you bring that up, dude. I was just reading the that picture, right? You remember the post that he made,
Yeah.
right? About the cyber hornets. Hold on a second, because now I obviously I got to go pull this thing up, right?
No, I'm not discrediting Michael
No, of
for
course not.
doing what he's doing. I mean, he's an absolute genius. He's shredding the traditional finance market, and he's bringing his shareholders real value compared to what they had before he discovered Bitcoin and went down the rabbit hole. But what people have to remember, what people have to remember is Michael Saylor is going to do what's best for Michael Saylor, and in order for him to have like that GameStop effect on his share price, on his company stock, he's going to have to draw support, especially from the pleb culture.
I do agree, and I just, before we continue, I found the post. I'll pop it up here on the show so that people can actually see it. This was from 2020. Okay, this is the old Saylor that some newer Bitcoiners may not be familiar with. Okay, so this was a post that he put out back on I think it was December 2020. The unsung heroes, the people who saw the future, they bled for the future. They dragged the thing on their back. They went through hell. They fought Fork War I, Fork War II. They stood up against the establishment. They stood up against the miners. They stood up against the exchanges. They were betrayed. Who knows how many times? They got up and they kept working. The Bitcoin maximalists, they deserve this. People ought to show them respect. It matters. Michael Saylor. So those were really nice words. I always appreciate those kinds of words. But in hindsight, it's got that Pied Piper effect.
Oh yeah, sure.
the singing the tune down the road, and this is kind of my feeling this cycle. It's just a bunch of Pied Pipers, and it just, I don't know about you, but does this feel like the 2017 cycle again? But this time the institutions are here. You know what I mean? Like in 2017. The big news was really just Fidelity, right? And maybe Bakkt and like a couple of other things, but nothing really big. But now in this cycle, we've got all the ETFs. You've got country stacking. You've got, and we're going to get into this because I definitely want your take on this, but we've got the people pretending that the federal government is discussing a strategic Bitcoin reserve, whereas it actually is being discussed at the state level. So does it not kind of feel like 2017, but things are a little bit more concrete now?
27. It's 2017 on the next level. We quickly forget that government is not our friend. There's a 1,000-year history of showing us that government is not our friend. there's a long history of corporations not being our friend. They're gonna do what they're meant to do. You know, they have their playbook, we have ours. You know, this is, you know, if this is a money for the people, you know, it's a money for the people to money for everybody, and it's gonna survive no matter what. You know, how well are we going to survive, and what, you know, what is the pain level that we're going to experience through that chain of survival. You know, the you know, I have two takes on the whole SBR and the corporate strategies. And like I said, you know, government's going to do government, corporations are going to do company things. One of them is, you know, ask yourself, you know, what is the end game to their stacking furiously? You know, do they want to co-opt the chain? Do they want to eventually fork the chain? You know, do they want, you know, once they've accumulated the majority of the Bitcoin, do they want to just hold it and then create shares on top of that just to be traded without moving the coins at all on chain? You know, there's, you know, if you game theory it out at their level, you know, there's a lot of questions, and there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of reasons to pay attention.
Do you think that everything they're doing is in vain? Because I'll tell you that this is kind of my issue, right? Is that, and I think I said this in the clip I released a couple of days ago. Like, it's this kind of idea where Bitcoiners believe that there's like some type of like fancy, sophisticated 5D chess, right? Where, and I used to believe this too, a lot more than I do now. That essentially this is the Trojan horse, right? That essentially, right, the regulators, the government, they recognize that they cannot stop Bitcoin, so now it becomes the story of the bed of Procrustes, right, where the king essentially tries to fit the person in the bed, right, so to speak. So if you don't know that story, you know, it's like if the person is too tall, right, he cuts their legs. If they're too short, he stretches them out, right? It's make them fit. And essentially, this is kind of the allegory for what the government is attempting to do with Bitcoin. And the question is, like, are we actually winning, or is the government just doing what the government does, and this is just a giant long hampering process, right? This is where I get kind of stuck.
Well, just like it's a repeat of 2017. You know, the corporations and governments are going to be going through their shitcoin phase, their blockchain phase. You know, and at the end of the day, I mean, Bitcoin's going to win, and anybody trying to co-opt the chain, you know, the users, co-opt the network, they're going to get fucking wrecked in the end. It always happens that way, and it always will. It's just, you know, is the social attack going to work on some of the users? Like look at what happened with Bcash. They spent millions and millions of dollars trying to co-opt the network.
That's right. And the miners.
And all they got was a bunch of pussies who were easily convinced, and then they just all ended up going broke. The miners, the Bcashers, you know, it's just the name of the game. You know, Bitcoin's going to survive no matter what. That's why it's so beautifully designed, you know. But it's not to say that we're not going to have another episode with the, you know, the governments, corporations, the banks. They're gonna unfortunately, it's gonna be like Groundhog Day. We're gonna be repeating the cycle in somewhat of a strange way, but you know, if they try to co-opt it, they're gonna get wrecked. And you know, here we are, we'll be like, we told you so. And okay, let's move on and on to the next thing.
On the grand scale, Do you think that we have temporarily forsaken freedom or the freedom aspect of Bitcoin for NGU? Because, and I'll explain why I'm asking this question. And again, I'm trying to like keep, doesn't make a difference, but the point is this, right? I believe, and I'm not the only one, but I'm not trying to validate it, but anyways, I believe that NGU must occur, right? Like it doesn't matter, like, but in order for Bitcoin to succeed, NGU must take place. Now, that is not necessarily the most important part of it, right? Because of course, there's the other qualities of Bitcoin, the censorship resistance, solving the general Byzantines problem, right? The hard cap, like all of these qualities together, right? It's like alchemy, right? One quality on its own is not enough, but you put them all together and it becomes this kind of unstoppable driving force. So going back to my original question, right? Have we forsaken freedom for NGU? The reason why I ask this is because sometimes, right? Like when I see the bullshit that's being done by the current president and his affiliates, right? When I see the big promises being made by talking heads in the space, and then we end up seeing a speech like we did yesterday from David Sachs, where he's literally forced to talk about Bitcoin, right? That didn't come. I don't know if you saw the 44-minute interview or even the last snippet where the lady asked the question to him about Bitcoin, but he wasn't actually even going to talk about Bitcoin. It was all about stable coins, and it was all about maintaining the US hegemony. So again, my long-winded question, right? Have we forsaken the freedom for NGU? Sometimes I feel that way, and it's
Yeah,
discouraging,
I
right?
I posted I posted a tweet with that clip where you know where they were laughing in the background, and
Yeah, you
if
saw that?
if you've been any judge of character, and you watch them laugh a couple times, going through those motions, it's a very cynical laugh, and it kind of opened up a little bit of I mean, it almost confirmed one of my theories is that they're just going to quietly stack as much as they can
Yeah,
without putting it in the SBR, or without putting it in a sovereign wealth fund, because you know
they want to
if
load up their bags.
if 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 they knew how resilient Bitcoin was, um, they wouldn't be trying to co-opt it. If they I don't know,
Yep,
it's
that's right.
but
It's hubris.
it's pure hubris, and
It is.
with all hubris is an instant downfall. In regards to the NGU thing, I mean, NGU is definitely important. It's programmed into the code. Every 4 years, we cut the supply in half, and adoption increases. Maybe not at the level that we would like. We would like all 8 billion people to adopt a Bitcoin standard tomorrow, for sure. But again, it's in the kind, cruel words of Christine Lagarde, it'll come, it'll come. Be patient. Low time preference, right?
Hmm.
But NGU is important, especially it's an attractive quality for people who don't quite understand it. It's like, holy shit, I can put a bunch of money in this thing, and then 10x my money in 48 years. But it's that it's part of that Trojan horse thing. You're attracted by the NGU, and then once you're in it, and then you start asking the questions, and then you start making all these new discoveries, and then you realize what it is, and then and then depending on your experience in life, you're gonna identify with a lot of its great qualities, and then you're gonna embrace them more than NGU. And that's just part of the journey that we all have gone through. Like, here's a real quick story. So
Hmm.
before I discovered Bitcoin, before I got into it, I was a tour manager, and I spent a lot of time in Europe. Probably about 3.5 months at a time. Come back for a month, go back out on the road for another 3 months or so, and I would have my pay direct deposited. So, I never had a ATM card. It was just strictly for direct deposit. Well, a couple of years goes by, and I start going through my finances. I look through my bank statements, and I notice there's all these ATM withdrawals, $20 at a time, in a ton of them. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? I go down. I'm not going to say which bank because I don't want to get you demonetized for any reason, but it's the second largest bank in the country. And
Oh boy.
so I talked to my account manager, and I'm like, I think there's a mistake. And they're like, okay, we'll look into it. Some time went by, nothing was done, and it still kept happening. I'm like, oh, maybe this is a bug, or maybe somebody hacked it. But anyway, it got to the point where I actually had to have my lawyer, send him a letter. We ended up taking him to court. And by this time I'm pissed. I want him to burn. I want him to burn, because we're talking, thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah, they're stealing your time, man.
and they weren't willing. They were just gonna, like, okay, this little pleb, we have $1,500 an hour lawyers, we'll smash them in court, whatever. But it got to the point where we caught them red-handed, and I was basically forced to take the settlement. Even the judge, which was most likely bought out, forced the settlement. Said, we're not going to take this to trial. Just take the money.
What a justice system.
So my hatred for the banking system was, boiling over before I even heard of Bitcoin. Fast forward to Occupy, and like I remember the Bitcoin Center in New York. And I'm like, the more I learned about it, and it wasn't back then, it wasn't about NGU, it was about, be your own bank. And this is money that governments and banks don't control. And that was what was attractive to me. And then began my rabbit hole journey with Bitcoin meetups and everything else.
Very, very interesting. And I find it also interesting that we both have similar types of stories before we ever discovered Bitcoin. I was debanked by my bank, one of the I think it's either the second I think it's the second biggest bank in Canada, or the third one. Anyways, I was debanked because my boss, the company I worked for, essentially started bouncing their checks. So, and what happened was that they were using a payroll service. I believe it was Ceridian at the time. Anyways, they were using a payroll service, and essentially what that does is, the payroll service kind of acts as, in a way, a credit window, right? They'll issue the checks on behalf of the company, even though the money isn't necessarily there, with the understanding that eventually that money will appear in the account, and it's credits, right? It's just trust and credits. And of course, the company I was working for didn't have the money to give to the payroll company. So a month later, right, you're just going along, and all of a sudden you go to pay for groceries, and you can't buy food. No more food, no more nothing. So yeah, man, this is exactly to your point. It really hits home, and I think that's a little bit different, right? This goes back to the whole thing about the Bitcoiners that came into the space earlier than the Bitcoiners today. I find today, and again, it's just my impression, we get a lot more of these hopium cheerleader NGU guys, and a lot less of people that come from, and I'm not meaning to sound this in a good or bad way, but it's just more of a grassroots, right? Like, you were here because you were
disenfranchised.
We're baptized by fire, right? It's like that's experience. Like this is where I come from too. I think a lot of the early Bitcoiners, this is where they come from. And
they haven't
makes for a different person.
They haven't suffered yet.
No, they haven't.
And the one thing that I discovered about life is this is all a cycle. It's like it's all cyclical. We can have great times like we're having now. It's like you can definitely feel this pole shift happening.
Yeah.
Because we've gone through some really crazy, tyrannical stuff, and not just, I mean, in the US, I mean, it was manageable, but it was like tipping on the edge of like full on authoritarian. What's happening in Europe is just absolutely nuts, and they're going to go through their own cycle. But other countries, we forget how small our tiny bubble is.
Yes.
The rest of the world is really jacked up, and a lot of the plebs in Africa and Southeast Asia and India and Russia, and I mean, they're experiencing a hostile takeover of their freedom, their sovereignty, their money. So when we talk about how a lot of people have it easy, it's it's almost like we have to look beyond our little bubble.
It's a good
Yeah,
point.
I mean, Bitcoin is, the United States is probably the largest share of hodlers and miners. But for now, Bitcoin's going to outlive us, outlast us, by 100x.
Oh yeah.
It's going to continue. But again, the human experience is all felt through cycles. So we could have a great next 8 years in America, but who's to say we're not going to slip back into tyranny? What's to say that some of these authoritarian Democrats, people on the other side, aren't going to come up with a new marketing gimmick and pull the popular vote and swing it their way, and then they're going to be able to try again, and then we are in a new turning, so to speak.
I think it never, yeah. I think that aspect of it never ends, right? Because the human is still the human. So humans desire control, humans are greedy, humans are fearful, and humans desire power. Not all of us, right? And everybody to different degrees. But I can't, right? I do agree with you. Like it's a pendulum sway. So we are going to see it go back in that direction.
And that's
Yeah.
that's why it's important to have strong fundamentals and principles. And it's not just for us. I mean, I know a lot of people listening, and a lot of people we know, they have children, and they're not stacking.
Mhm.
They're not stacking like they do for them. I mean, yeah. I mean, you're stacking. You have you know, unimaginable wealth, but the majority is thinking about their kids and their grandkids and passing
That's
that
right.
down to them. So if you have flawed principles, you're not just going to pass the Bitcoin down to them. You're going to pass your flawed principles down to them. So having the right time preference and principles is just as important as stacking and hodling. I read this morning a great piece by Pierre Richard, talking about NGU and the need to pay attention to politics, and if you're so inclined to actually educate these politicians and educate our representatives on the true nature of Bitcoin and its principles, because it's easy for people, especially with the old fiat mindset, to hold on to those and bring those into the Bitcoin ecosystem. So I encourage everybody to look up Pierre Richard and read that latest piece that he just put out. It was great. Well, shout out to
I'll
Pierre.
go look for it, or if you can give me the link, and we'll put it. I'll add it to the show notes. Yeah, I absolutely love Pierre's work. I think that I mean, look, it's actually, speaking of which, I think they just did a revamp of the Nakamoto Institute as well. Him and Bitstein. I think they and it's not a joke revamp, like returning MicroStrategy into just strategy. I mean, they actually, I think, revamped the site. So, but yeah, I love Pierre's work, and I always suggest people read Everyone's a Scammer from the Nakamoto Institute. That's by Bitstein, not Pierre.
Yes.
But still, yeah, that is a great introductory work. But okay, So going back to this, right, and going back to the pendulum sway, and try as they might, right? Governments are going to do whatever it is that they're going to do. What are your thoughts on the SBR? Even whether it's at the federal level or at the state level, I'm seeing, and I don't know if this is actually true, but supposedly Wyoming's was just rejected. I don't know what the stipulations were for that, but I can tell you right away, in my opinion, when it comes to this, I genuinely believe it's a LARP. And I'm not saying that it's bad for Bitcoin or anything like that, right? It's like I get it, right? Attention, the attention economy is attention, and network effects work as they do. So, like I'm not shitting on it. I'm just saying I think that there's a major disparity between the excitement and what people believe and what is real and what is actually happening and how those processes are taking place. So what are your thoughts on the I guess the perception of the strategic Bitcoin reserve? And I guess it's a two-part question, because the second part of it is, do you actually do you think the federal government is actually going to purchase Bitcoin when they really? Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to add any of my bias. No bias.
Again, going back to the government is not your friend. They're going to do what benefits the government, regardless of whether this new administration is for the people, or partly for the people and partly for themselves, or do a trifecta where the third part is reinventing the way government governs. Getting rid of all the corruption and all the waste, and then that could be if they're stripping all the waste from the corruption, they're just going to find new pet projects for that money, for that taxpayer money. We're still going to be tax slaves no matter what. You can count on that. That's not going away. But in regards to the SBR, my opinion, they needed the Bitcoin ecosystem, the crypto ecosystem at large, to help push them over the finish line. Make no mistake. Make no mistake about that. There was a lot of time. There was a lot of time and energy spent on courting the Bitcoin ecosystem, because even in our little Twitter hole, there is a lot of Bitcoiners out there, more than we realize, that have a lot of leverage, and they want to capture that leverage. And Trump, this is Trump's last term. He's not going to be reelected.
Yeah, exactly.
But he did need to go. He did need to get over the finish line. And and who are the best people to help him? A bunch of anonymous, autistic Bitcoiners on social media who basically can swing narratives better than a government funded media can. It's clear that we've taken down a global cabal with our memes, but at the same time, it's like one cabal becomes another. So the SBR, Fink has a lot of, I think Larry Fink has a lot of influence in the SBR, and he'll probably end up managing a sovereign wealth fund if that's ever developed. Ludnick, Bassett, yeah, they all have Bitcoin because they know how valuable Bitcoin is. But are they going to put that in the SBR? I doubt it. You know what they're going to do? They need to save the U.S. dollar. And and what is Tether, the fourth largest buyer of treasuries? They're going to do something with Tether in the SBR. Maybe even build some kind of inroad into the treasury. And I mean, let's face it, they need something new. They need a new strategy for our debt, for our T-bills and treasury. because I think all the tricks have already been played out, and
Mm-hmm.
these people aren't smart enough to continue to create more monetary magic. You know, the can is so dented from being kicked down the road. It's like they just need a new tool, and Tether
And this is it.
and blockchain is their tool. So I think I think we all want our bags to go to the moon, but it's like there's a difference between being wealthy and being rich. Rich people don't really have any real wealth because they spend it or because they didn't earn it. People who have wealth, they don't spend their wealth, they leverage it. And it's a mindset, number one. And again, what is, if this is the case, what's, you got to ask yourself, what's the end game? And central banks are going to be playing a massive role behind the scenes in their decision making. I'm sure that Jerome Powell and the board have had secret discussions about this SBR and not putting Bitcoin, because they know what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin,
I know exactly what it is.
Bitcoin is the final nail in their coffin. So they're not going anywhere. They're going to fight. Think of Bitcoin as a war of attrition. It's going to be a long battle, and if you're not ready for it, then it's hopefully there's enough people to fight through it. But again, this is part of the social attack. But we just got to keep spreading the message of what it means to be principled and low time preference.
In your explanation about this, I can't help but think, right, because essentially this all goes back again to the whole bed of Procrustes, right, and the essentially the government trying to shoehorn Bitcoin, and this is kind of where the whole Trojan horse aspect comes in, right, as the government tries to figure out a way to control or to create the perception of control of Bitcoin. It's essentially, right, it's like the tighter you grip your hand, the more sand slips through your fingers, right, like there's more cracks. And essentially, I do believe, right, that the government is, and central bankers are going to attempt to use Bitcoin. I said this actually in a few videos ago. Bitcoin is the most pristine monetary anchor in history. So if we go back and take a look at the way that money came about, so a lot of the history that we've been taught about money is just completely false. Like the idea that we started off with barter and stuff like that, that's all fucking nonsense. Okay, money has essentially always, even from the beginning, has just been simply a record of debts, right? A record of debt. And so in really ancient times, there were sticks with notches that represented this debt. But the point I'm trying to make is that the economies that we live in today spawn from debt, meaning there was an original borrower, right? So that borrower is the trusted entity, the government, right? Like everybody, through violence has to, trust the government. Now, that debt instrument, right, or that story, over time, you can poke holes in it, right? Because the government is made up of people. People can't be trusted. People are greedy, stupid, fearful, blah, blah, blah. So, naturally, there's a lot of work that has to be done in upholding the perception of the benevolent, trustworthy government, right? But what if these incompetent, greedy, selfish governments could simply continue to do or continue to act in their depravity, right, of just infinite money printing, and they can do it with this not original debt, but with the idea that there is this pristine monetary anchor outside of their coercion that they can point to, right? Now, of course, they're still just printing money, but now all of a sudden the story changes for them, right? All of a sudden now they've got this grassroots thing that some random person, right, supposedly did on the internet, and hey, all these people are gravitating towards it because of its amazing qualities. Bitcoin has the best story. Now, all of a sudden, the government doesn't need to rely on so many of its, bullshit tricks anymore. Now it's got this pristine anchor it can point at, and it can say, look, we get that we're not the best, but we're doing the right thing for the people by having the strategic Bitcoin reserve. So I do think the whole point of that, my long story, is to say, even though the can is almost non-existent and totally dented, I believe that Bitcoin creates a bit of longer life for that can. What are your thoughts? Doesn't mean they don't fail in the end, but they're getting to kick it again.
Yeah, they're gonna kick it again and again until they can't. I mean, it's, the whole system of money from its beginning, has always been flawed. There's, humans will always find a way to, hyperinflate the currency, or, whatever instrument. You go back to the beads or the shells or the feathers. It's like, okay, these people are using these beads as money. So you'll just, go, manufacture a whole shitload of beads and then show up, and, now you control the whole civilization, or like gold, gold was perfect until it wasn't, until they started, filling it with tungsten, gold plated tungsten, that's kind of like the way they may view Bitcoin as, okay, we can't print more of it, we can't change its code, but we can co-opt it by social engineering the population, by maybe we hold, maybe this is eventually, 10, 20 years down the road, after they've gotten wrecked off of trying to trying to co-opt it in whatever, infantile ways. But it could possibly become a reserve where all nations' currencies are based off of. I mean, that would be kind of like the ideal thing, but going even back to the caveman, the first one of the first cave paintings was basically a ledger, detailing who was owed what. So it's, a ledger, just like, Bitcoin's blockchain, it goes hand in hand with the currency. It just so happens that, Satoshi found the perfect solution to solving that problem, and that's where we are. Unfortunately, we have to sit through companies and banks and governments to realize that, and they're eventually going to have to bend the knee. There's no doubt about it. So just make sure you got enough popcorn.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Unfortunately, this hour flew by, and we do gotta wrap it up. So for the viewers and listeners, guys, have no fear. Bitcoin is still winning. Okay, it's just the progression is a pendulum sway. So this is why we always say to zoom out. Don't pay attention to the noise. All of this is noise in between. Anyways, run the banks, man. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. This was absolutely amazing. I look forward to having you on again. Is there, if the viewers or listeners want to find you, you want to provide your Twitter handle? We'll put it in the show notes as well.
We'll put it in the show notes. I would suggest not following me, or if you do follow me, go ahead and block me or mute me. And if you haven't followed me yet, don't follow me, please. But anyway, yeah, thanks for having me on. It was a real pleasure. I've been a huge fan of your show for a long time, huge supporter. Just keep killing it.
I really appreciate you, man. Thank you again for joining me, and I hope to have you on again. Take it easy.
All right, brother.
Peace.
toxic than the most toxic Bitcoin maxi ever. They said he's more toxic than the most